Okay, thank you, everyone. I think we'll go straight in, shall we? Are you ready to go, Allyson? Come on, let's do it. Yeah, come on down.
All right. Come on down. All right. This is Chad's
Hi,
house.
nice to meet you.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Good to
Please take a seat. Okay, thank you, everyone. I'm sorry to have to wrap that panel up, but we are really trying to stay on track time-wise. But yeah, we could have talked all day about some of those topics, and we can carry on right now. Joining me is Allyson Anderson Book. She is the Chief Sustainability Officer at Baker Hughes, the energy technology company, if anyone is unfamiliar with Baker Hughes, that provides solutions for energy and industrial companies worldwide, customers worldwide. Now, in your role, you oversee Baker Hughes' net zero strategy.
Yep.
By driving sustainable operations, supporting commercial energy transition solutions, and ensuring market creation of these solutions via stakeholder engagement and policy development. So, tell us a bit more about Baker Hughes, in case someone might not know who you are. What's your role specifically there as well?
So it's too bad. All the people that leave miss hearing about that we're the company that has the solutions versus a company with the challenges. All right. So just as you're leaving, just realize that that's what's happening. All right. So we're a company that basically has a legacy. We're 115 years old. We've been around for a very long time. We came out of classic oil field service and equipment, but what we are today is very different than that. And so we sell power solutions that are a little smaller than you think of like a big power plant turbine. We power behind the scenes around the world in over 120 countries. We also do a whole range of different activities. Anything that's got rotating machinery, we put the sensors and the software on that for condition monitoring. So if anybody here is from the Midwest, seen a lot of wind turbines, there's a really good chance Baker Hughes kit is on that. Right. In addition, if you guys drive a car or you use a cell phone, your product's probably been inspected by our inspection equipment. Okay, and so we're not just within the energy sector; we are a bit more broad than that. Where we're headed is the next frontier for us is that a lot of that conventional energy technology that we've had for other systems works today for things like hydrogen, deployment of hydrogen, carbon capture and storage, geothermal, all of the big sort of gee whiz solutions that we've been talking about, like they're new, but they've been around for a long time. The first, Baker Hughes invented the very first compressor to compress hydrogen over 100 years ago, okay? And so if you don't remember anything, know that hydrogen's been on the scene for over 100 years, all right? In thinking about using it for a bunch of different applications. First turbine, we invented that. I can't remember, maybe in the 60s, 70s, something like that. So that's been around for a while. So just think about that as we talk about all of our challenges. Ultimately, if we all want to get to net zero, that's a big part of the solution kit. Yes. Absolutely. My role is I look at our sustainability journey, but then how do we use that as the support base for deploying the commercial technology I just talked about for our customer base. There's a disconnect in a lot of companies that I've seen where we're making this widget, it's really cool, go and buy it. But they're not connecting their experience of how hard it is to think about lowering your emissions and having a more sustainable operation with the reality. And so you've got to be the company, if you've got a solution, you've got to think about, does it work for us? Would we use the solution, right? Otherwise, it's a solution with no problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And obviously, whenever we're talking about challenges, we are talking about solutions, right? We're not highlighting negatives here.
Right.
So tell us about some of the biggest challenges that you have faced in your role.
Well, so I've got the internal and the external parts that we work on, right? A big challenge today is that if you're an equipment provider and you want to look at selling big solutions, right? So one of the amazing parts of Baker Hughes is that we have direct air capture capability, but we invested in an earlier piece of technology that as it scales looks to be a really game-changing play for us, or for society, I would say. And so that's using something called metal organic frameworks, and it sort of looks like kitty litter, okay? But it's not, and basically it captures CO2 from the air. That, for me, the challenge is seeing that scale sooner than we'd hope. I'd like to see that happen. The challenge is, as you scale any technology, you've got certain barriers that you've got to address as they come up. I think society needs it faster than what anybody can really deploy. While DAC exists today, it doesn't exist in a way that makes a lot of sense from the energy burn. So parasitic energy load's pretty high. It's pretty expensive, and they're not, you don't get a lot of bang for your buck in terms of how hard the system's got to work and how much you capture and store.
So what is the biggest challenge for that air capture? What's the biggest challenge holding that back right now? The scalability?
Yeah, scale is a big part of it. A lot of the conventional stuff is really big equipment, and you've got to think about how could you deploy it in a lot of different areas so that you don't have this massive piece of infrastructure either. Depending on the type, it could be a physics problem, a thermodynamic limit problem. There are people who have been researching this around the world. I'm a super fan of a guy named Klaus Lochner. He's been looking at how to put direct air capture on backpacks, which is pretty neat. So go Google it. You'll be excited to see that you can wear it on your back. But the other challenge is the internal CSO, I should say, is it's all the same things that a lot of people have had. But I would say that as society is responding to climate change, there is a lot of the hype that happens that sort of puts people on edge. And so they might think that their livelihood is threatened. And that is a really big challenge in the energy sector today. So as our sector is transforming, there are people that say, wait, is gas in or out? Or do we make this choice or this choice? It creates fear. And an energy transition isn't meant to be abrupt. It's not an on and off switch. And so we've got to be very reasonable in how we think about transitioning so that we don't have the unfortunate problem where we isolate whole communities as we leapfrog with a certain technology. If a grid doesn't exist in place, it doesn't exist. You can't leave those people behind.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
I don't want to go into politics, but I will.
You can.
Now, I've been watching a lot of TV news in the build up to the US election.
Yeah.
And fracking, for instance, is one thing that's been raising its head. Is that a classic example of where people are maybe a little bit scared of the technology or scared of the process?
Yeah, definitely. That's been a historic area. And while our company is not big in that part, but that's a good example, is that people, when they don't really understand the science behind it or the engineering, are quick to make a snap judgment about something that they read. And I do worry about that at times for some of the up and coming bits of technology that are being introduced or that have been out for a while for the energy transition, is that fear gets in the mix, and then you've got distrust that often happens between companies and communities. You can manage all of that. I always maintain that there isn't a subsurface activity that I wouldn't feel comfortable living around because I know it can be done safely. I'm actually a geologist, I should say. And so that's not a classic mix of sustainability and geology together, but there it is. And I've always felt really comfortable because I know what safety looks like and I know what strong environmental performance looks like. And so if people take the time to really look at that, I think they'll find their minds changed.
Now, one of our previous speakers, it was the lady from ABB, I think, talked about nuclear as a part of the solution in the race to net zero 2050. That's another classic example of an existing technology where people have a strong opinion about how it should be used. And governments across the world have been cutting back on nuclear, especially in Europe, for instance. But lots of technology. By the way, we're not going to talk about nuclear too much, but technology like SMRs, right?
Yeah.
That looks like a key piece of technology that can help us achieve our goals. But do you think society will accept them?
I think parts of society will. Depends on where it is. There are definitely parts of the world where you can have activities that don't impact local communities in the same way. It's also I would say the relative education around the system and whether or not a company does the diligence. There are some classic examples of where companies have come in the mining sector and done it wrong, okay? And then sometimes where they've been extraordinary and the community's very bought into having a really scarring sort of interface with the resource. But because they do it in such an environmentally sound way and they had that stakeholder engagement up front, they'll take it in because it creates jobs, right? and quite frankly, can revitalize a community. Now, SMR may not have that pull, but there's a lot to like about small modular reactors today. And like what ripped from the headlines, you probably saw the announcement about the acquisition of 3 Mile Island, and I think that was the one. Did you guys read about that? Go check it out. It's pretty interesting. You'll want to read it.
Okay, let's pivot away from nuclear for a second.
Sure.
How do you help your customers achieve their sustainability goals?
Yeah, so from where I sit, we do a lot, and this is something that you might not have heard yet from anybody on the stage, is that we've been looking at how that nexus of our products and whether or not that you can consume electricity and energy, et cetera, burn natural gas, and actually save emissions at the same time. So that means we have to be really invested in knowing our product carbon footprint, which a lot of companies have, okay? But one of the areas where we've been differentiated is we come in from the first bid and look at how can we reduce the emissions with a certain kit and ship it in a different way, do X, Y, Z, and be competitive on a cost and emissions basis, okay? So we started to do that. We just dipped our toes in the water about 4 or 5 years ago on that, and it really took off. And so now we're at a point where we've had to look at opening a sustainability service desk and hired up staff in another part of the world to work on that. So we have a 24-hour cycle of response time to answer customer requests related to emissions, the social aspects of suppliers, et cetera. And I would view that as a pretty wild success story there, which is pretty fantastic. So that's something people might not have heard about. We view sustainability as a service, not just our kit. Okay, and so one of the examples that we have is that sometimes when friends of ours within our community or customers are just getting started on a journey, we actually come in and walk through the evolution of a digital system with them. We have a nearly fully automated data production cycle for anything that we're putting out that's public data. It goes through 2 levels of audit with our financial auditor externally as well, and so we help our partners think about beginning that journey. As you heard on the last panel, it's like getting started.
Yeah.
So almost like consultancy, as well as helping people to select the right kind of kit. If they want to understand how their bespoke product has a different footprint than the one off the shelf, we can look at that analysis as well. And so we're trying to be really nimble. Frankly, the requests that have come in, 3 years ago, we got about 30 requests for emissions work. Now, midway through the year, we're 400 or 500 discrete tickets come into the center, and we actually create analysis that are bespoke for every one of those. Yeah.
Okay. Something else that we heard on the last panel was about how to embed sustainability in it and ensure it's a core part of the business strategy.
Yeah.
So can you tell us how you're doing that, and also give us some maybe specific examples of how you're driving that internal change as well?
It's worth noting, we're a company of about 58,000 people. We have another, it's not a number I have the latest numbers on, but somewhere around 30,000 contractors that work for us. And so anybody who's a Baker Hughes employee has that. You heard it on the last panel where people are baking it into their goals and objectives, right? So we have a similar thing. Every employee's got a scope 1 and 2 reduction associated with their annual performance. And so we set big targets, and our business units all have to meet those. And so when we look at embedding sustainability, that was one piece, but we didn't start there. We did go down the road. We still have sustainability champions, but we have something else that's called Carbon Out. So Carbon Out is an employee-driven, grassroots-based program that we've given a lot of resources to, and it's the 58,000 people in our company that flag the emission reduction projects that we have. They don't have to stop with that. It can be water, it can be a lot of different other things, but it's primarily emissions reduction. And so one thing that's different about what we are doing, even though we sell all this really big kit, okay, we started by saying we're not going to use offsets, so we're a zero offset company. We won't claim to be net zero until we actually achieve it. We don't use virtual power purchase, VPPAs, okay? We'll only use a PPA if we can actually qualify that the electron came from the grid and it was in fact renewable energy. So anything that you see off the top is real, right? Then we've got a couple of other things, is that because we've empowered our employees to find that low-hanging fruit across the company, we have looked at that nexus with climate risk and completely reassessed our physical base in the company. As such, we have not actually had to spend money over the top from anything that wasn't already planned. And we've reduced our emissions already by 30% over 4 years, okay? By being better in our operations. And so for everybody out there who says they're spending more money, we are not. We have built it into the business. It is not additional cost. Now, as we hit that part of the abatement curve that starts to go asymptotic, then we'll be looking more at now, let's use our DAC equipment to make sure that we can close that gap for the residual that you can't actually reduce any further, right?
What was that big word you used a minute ago?
Asymptotic.
Yeah.
It's when the line flattens out and it approaches zero.
I thought I'd ask the question that everyone else was wondering.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So going back to nerd town.
I knew what it was, obviously, just for the benefit of the audience.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were one of the first companies in your sector to publicly announce that, a net zero commitment. Why did you do that?
I wasn't around when we did that.
No.
So I came in a few months later after the decision was made by our chairman and the board of directors to set that out. Largely, it was related to the fact that as we were spun out of General Electric, we had a really unique kind of, I would say, everything that we have within our portfolio is very unique and stands to differentiate on the energy transition. And so that was a really big part of that broader corporate strategy, is to say, hey, look, we'll show you we can get there and we can do it for you. And so I think that was a lot of that decision making, but I was not in the boardroom at that moment. Yeah.
Diplomatic answer. Let's wrap things up with one thing here. If the people walking away from this session, what's one thing that you'd like them to remember, apart from that long word?
Asymptotic.
That's the one.
You can forget that one.
What should they be taking away from this session?
Take away that if you're doing this earnestly within a company or an organization and people are being responsible and excited about it, shouldn't cost you extra money. Not right now. The fruit's rotting on the ground. You just got to pick it up, okay? And so empower your people. I wouldn't say all 58,000 people in our company even really get what carbon out is on some days, but we have a really impassioned group of about 1,500 to 2,000 employees that really drive it home every day. So remember, you can do it, just get creative. As we're out and about, talk to other peers. I learned today that the website of L'Oreal is hugely emissive, and all of the photo shoots that get all those photos online. And I thought, oh my God, we have that too. We have 40 or 50,000 web pages. I should go back and look at that. What's the carbon footprint? So share information. That's easy stuff. And we'll save money because we'll shut down part of the website. All right? Get engaged, guys. It's actually fun.
Does anyone have any questions from the floor, actually, before we wrap up?
All right.
No, I think you've covered it all off. Thank you very much, Allyson.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks,